What's up, everybody? I'm Dr. CI, the CEO and founder of Diversity and Inclusology, and welcome to video 6 of our learning series where we're going to talk about unconscious bias. So remember, I start out every video by defining the topic. So what is unconscious bias? Unconscious bias relates to a stereotype and attitude that we have about a specific group or an individual that impacts us in 3 ways. Remember, it impacts our understanding, our ability to make decisions, and then the actions that we have towards other people. Now remember, I told you in this video we'd be talking about the 10 ways that unconscious bias operates in human beings. And the first one is selective attention. Now selective attention is your ability to selectively see the things that you may have experienced directly and to only see those things or to finally start to notice them. So for example, a pregnant person is more likely to notice another pregnant person. Or have you ever bought a red car and you're all of a sudden driving on the street and you start to see more red cars? That's how selective attention works in unconscious bias, because once you have experienced it directly, all of a sudden you start to notice these things. The next is diagnosis bias, and that is the propensity to label a person, place, or a thing based off of one or previous experience that you have had without knowing anything about that person, place, or thing. So you might have had a bad interaction with someone who was black, and then you look at another black person and you think that all black people act that way, even though consciously you may have had bad experiences with other people. That's what confirmation bias kind of starts to creep in. So what you'll see is that the 10 different operations of bias will overlap in some way, shape, or form. So now you've diagnosed this person, place, or thing, even without any prior knowledge of who they are and what they might be capable of. The next one is called pattern recognition. And what that is your ability to create patterns based off of a prior experience. So you start to sort the information that you have received based on prior recognition. So remember, pattern recognition is about sorting something out. So the next two are value attribution, which is your ability to give something value based on what it is that they have presented or how they look. So for example, you might see a person wearing a certain type of shoe, and you have created value based on that. Or let's take that a step further. If you are in a company and you are hiring for a position and you think that a man is more valuable than a woman or a non-gender binary person, and you hire that person, right? Because it's the value they feel like you could bring to their company based on their identity. So it could be the skin that they're in, sexual orientation that they have, the clothes that they're wearing, etc. You have created value based on that. The next is pattern recognition. Now, pattern recognition is your ability to sort information based on a prior experience that you have had in some way, shape, or form. So in your brain, in your mind, you have started to create some sort of conclusion based on the prior experience that you have by sorting that naturally. Now, the next one is confirmation bias. And remember, we already done a video on that, so make sure you go back and check it out. But this is the tendency to seek out information to prove something that you already know to be true. So you are looking for new information to confirm a bias that you already have, a truth that you have preconceived in some way, shape, or form, and that you believe. So remember, that's confirmation bias. Then the next one is the priming effect. Now what the priming effect means is that you have created expectations of someone, place, or thing based on previous experience. So remember, it is creating the expectation of someone based off of prior experience. So if you are going into an interview with a candidate who is a woman, and your first candidate was a woman and she was terrible, you might have created expectation that women are terrible interviewers. And so you go into the interview differently, right? You have created this expectation that has created this action, and you are treating people differently based off of that unconscious bias. Now, that's the priming effect. So next we have commitment confirmation. And commitment confirmation always trips me out, right? Because you have people who commit to a certain point of view, and the thing about it is, even though they know it's wrong, but you have been committed to that point of view because in somehow, shape, or form, it is related to you in a way that sticks with you. So you commit to this perspective, even though you may have had another experience that proves that it can be totally wrong. But you don't want to be wrong. So you just commit that that might have been a coincidence, or someone might have been a unicorn, etc. And you commit to this bias that you have that tells a different story. That's commitment confirmation. Next, we have stereotype threat. So stereotype threat is usually the concern or the anxiety of a person that confirms a stereotype that has already been created about their groups, right? So you have created this anxiety because you have heard something that makes you believe it to be true. For example, there was a study done where they pulled men and women in and gave them the same test. But before the test, they pulled out the group of women and said, hey, women are less likely to do well on this test. And then once they took the test, they were less likely to get higher test scores than men. They even received lower test scores than men. And then what they did was they took a different group of people, and before the test, they didn't say anything to the women. And what they found is that in that group, they performed equally or higher than the men when they took that test. So that's stereotype threat, where you start to create anxiety or nervousness and you fulfill a stereotype that has been created about your group. That's an unconscious bias. And next we have anchoring bias. So anchoring bias, think about the anchor of a boat, right? What purpose does it serve? When you throw it outside of the boat, falls down into the water and it holds the boat still. Think about anchoring bias in that way, in the way that it operates in your mind. It is the trait to rely too heavily on one piece of information to confirm what you know, and you hold on to it, right? So you throw that mental anchor in your mind and you believe that this is what's happening and that this is the only way to go. How does this play? Let's say, for example, you're a hiring manager again, and you believe that only people from Stanford who are engineers are the best engineers. So everybody in your engineering department that you hire is from Stanford. And if somebody else has education on their resume that's from a different school, you don't even give them a second chance, because you have this anchoring belief that the best engineers come from Stanford, and you will not let that go, which is unconscious bias that results in the hiring in your department. So the last operation of unconscious bias that we're going to talk about is groupthink. And groupthink is the ability of a group of people to influence the way that you believe about a certain topic. So think about Harold's cycle of socialization, where I talk to you about the institutions that inform the way that we believe and think, and even the first socializations that you have, whether it's parents, families, friend, etc. And those don't always have to be positive interactions. But because of your exposure to this group, you have started to think differently about a specific topic, and you hold on to that even if you haven't experienced it directly or you know that it may be wrong. Groupthink is a form of unconscious bias and how it operates in our minds daily. Now, what are the tools that I'm going to give you? Make sure that you look in the description underneath the video so that you understand what resources we are providing for you to help you navigate unconscious bias. And there should be a ton of resources down there for you. But here's some questions that I want you to ask. So in video 5, when we talked about Harold's cycle of socialization, I asked you to create a chart and to think about where those biases come from and how they might be unconscious. I want you to form questions around that daily. Who or what do you trust the most in your life, and how does that shape your opinion? If and when someone is kind enough to give you feedback about how a bias might have surfaced, remember in video 2 I talked about tools that you might need in order to think about bias. It starts with asking yourself questions, because questions create awareness. And remember, I said the more awareness that you have regarding an unconscious bias, the less likely you are to do it, because you have started to create strategies and awareness for if and when it manifests, right? But you have to remember, good people have hidden biases, and I say it all the time, and yours will surface. And I hope that these videos and these resources that we provide for you during this learning series help you to navigate if and when that happens. Remember, we're growing and learning with you, so leave us some things in the comment section. Let us know how you're experiencing our videos. Also give us feedback on what topics you'd like for us to address, and I'm happy to see you again. Stay tuned for our video next week as we talk more about different topics in our learning series. Thank y'all for tuning in.